right, he is the national correspondent for The Atlantic, whose latest book is The Way of the Strangers, Encounters with the Islamic State. Graeme Wood. Hey, Graeme, how you doing? How are you, sir? Great to see you. Okay, so you wrote the book on ISIS. That can't be easy. And I remember when you wrote in The Atlantic about it, and we had an attack this week from somebody who was making no bones about the fact that he was in with ISIS, right?
Yeah, singing the fight song from his hospital bed.
Oh, real? Okay. And you wrote back in The Atlantic in 2015, the reality is that the Islamic State is Islamic, very Islamic. The religion preached by most of its ardent followers derives from coherent and even learned interpretations of Islam. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, people say ISIS has nothing to do with Islam, and what I'm suggesting is that it's part of the Islamic tradition. You know, the Islamic tradition is 1,400 years long, and it is diverse, and ISIS has a piece of that. It is a phenomenon that comes from that tradition. It's not the only thing that you could say was Islamic, but it's looking at things like the idea of a caliphate, like the idea that there are particular laws that were handed down from the beginning, and it is implementing them in a way that would be recognizable to Muslims from many, many centuries before.
When people say a religion is, it's almost a silly thing to say, right? Because it's practiced by different people in different ways. So
yeah, and
to some people it is ISIS, and to, of course, many more people it is not. But to just say it is a religion of peace, hopefully to all. Unfortunately, not to all.
Yeah, most Muslims do not consider ISIS the best representation of the religion, but we could say that about various Christian sects too. And we're totally used to talking about Christianity as having a crazy fringe, a kind of mainstream center, peaceful Christians, warlike Christians, and ISIS happens to be one part of that spectrum within Islam.
But the difference with the Islamic world is that there are many more fundamentalists, mainstream people.
Yeah.
Or what we would call fundamentalists.
I think the best analog within Christianity might be the Westboro Baptist Church, which is this group that used to picket the funerals of servicemen.
Yeah.
And
they picket me.
They're like 50 people.
Picket me.
It's a small group. With ISIS, unfortunately, there were about 40,000 people who traveled to Syria to fight on their side. So that's it's a much larger proportion. So
when people say that it's a double standard, how Trump reacted, now I think we all agree Trump's solutions are horrible, right? Okay.
I would agree with that.
And his reactions, yes. But they said there's a double standard in the reaction to the Vegas violence that we saw, the Las Vegas shooter about a month ago, and this. Or you mentioned the Westboro Baptist Church, people mentioned Tim McVeigh, they mentioned Anders Breivik, they mentioned the Ku Klux Klan. Is there a difference? Do you see, I mean, there is, I think you started to say, just in numbers.
Yeah, we don't even know what happened with Vegas yet, but the difference, I think, is that ISIS is claiming part of this tradition. So it does have a certain way of kind of justifying itself that's different from other types of violence. Now, it doesn't mean that those other types of violence aren't concerning. In fact, they, in many cases, claim much larger numbers, 59 people in Las Vegas. But what ISIS is able to do...
Well, that's this year.
Yeah, that's in
obviously.
One event.
And
ISIS has killed many more than that.
That guy was not trying to acquire nuclear weapons.
But he was very...
That's a big difference.
He's very effective at killing people from one hotel room, of course. But with ISIS, what we get is the sense that any individual Muslim can be kind of activated in an ISIS mold because of the belief that they can speak to this kind of understanding that ISIS is reviving a tradition that they have some part of. Now, that's something that I think certain other ideologies don't quite have the ability to do, is to try to awaken the sense that we've got the right version of something that you're already part of.
Okay. What do you think is the effect when people, I imagine this has happened to you because you've written realistically about this, say you're Islamophobic?
Yeah, I mean, I have to look at some of these issues with kind of, Trumpian, orange-tinted lenses. And I understand that this is not a great time to be a Muslim in the United States. Muslims are targets of bigotry, they're targets of actual Islamophobia, but at the same time, at some point you have to engage the bullshit detector. And if someone says ISIS has nothing to do with Islam, then I think they're really going to misunderstand what's motivating people to kill in its name.
And it cuts off debate, does it not?
It absolutely does, yeah.
My belief has always been that you're never going to solve the terrorism problem unless you modernize the religion. That until the religion itself has a reformation and enlightenment like Christianity did, this problem is going to persist. Would you agree with that?
I think it might even be a more dispiriting situation than that. ISIS, in some ways, is the Reformation within Islam. They're doing what, 500 years ago in Christianity, we had Martin Luther saying, we don't have to listen to the established church, we don't have to listen to the Pope. ISIS is saying, your neighborhood imam, forget him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We're the ones, we can just read the Quran, and we're going to have an interpretation that is extremely violent, but it's the right one, even though we're the minority. So this modernization of Islam can go both ways. It can go in an enlightened way, or it can go toward one that's unfortunately very violent.
And again, one of the differences, I think, is that there is more support in a general population. When we get this polling back, it seems to show like 20% of worldwide Muslims are what they would call Islamist. They're not terrorists, they're not taking it violently, but most of the things terrorists believe, they believe.
Yeah, they would say that they want Sharia to be represented in their government, but they might mean something so different from ISIS that they would hate ISIS. I mean, they might just believe that in some way the constitution in their countries should reflect Islam.
But death for leaving the religion.
There is disconcertingly high levels of support for that. That's true.
Right, things like that, which are not liberal principles.
No, they're not compatible with what I would say are, ideas of human rights that I would recognize.
Okay.